What's up, guys? Today I'm going to give you my breakdown on American corruption, essentially cronyism and corruption in America, who it favors and why. Again, don't take this as gospel. This is just strictly my opinion. I'm just an enthusiast of geopolitics and history and current affairs. I'm just going to give you my breakdown on what I think is going on, what's been going on, and maybe things we can do which are highly unlikely to fix it. So obviously there's a lot of cronyism in America. So for those of you who don't understand what this term means, which is fine, I had to look it up myself, and I didn't know what crony. I've heard of cronies, but think of what a crony is a person you're doing a favor to. So you're doing a favor to a friend, a donor, an ally, and things like this, right? Which of course you're gonna get corruption, which is an abuse of power for personal gain. So think of bribes, embezzlement, and inside deals, right? So how is this game rigged? Well, lobbying and legal bribes, right? So over $400 billion a year is spent in America on just lobbying alone. So think of companies like Pfizer, Lockheed Martin, Amazon, Meta, right? What they do is they hire ex-government officials to advocate, for them so they can ensure favorable legislation for their business or for them, right? Subsidies and tax breaks and things of that sort. So a lot of former Congress people, they often become lobbyists, or vice versa, or lobbyists become Congress people. So this is a practice known as the revolving door, if you will, right? Then you have to think about campaign financing and PACs, super PACs. Essentially, the Supreme Court ruled that corporations are people and that money is essentially speech, which equals unlimited super PAC funding, right? So billionaires and these mega corporations fund campaigns in exchange for influence. So essentially, they're running the country. This is just a corporate monarchy, if you will. Then you got to take into account dark money. This is essentially an undisclosed donor who's going to finance or give you money through a shell organization, right? So they're not named, or a shell corporation. So it's just a way to distort democracy. And then, of course, regulatory capture, which is another term, which means essentially think about like the FDA and the FCC and the SEC and the Environmental Protection Agency, right? So these are institutions that are designed to police people in these industries or corporations in these industries. But often what ends up happening is they get former execs from these industries and they'll put them in this position. So think of an exec from a petrochemical company, then he becomes the head of the EPA, right? I mean, that's like essentially putting the wolf in the hen house, if you will. Okay. Again, Wall Street. Don't get me started with Wall Street. You can go back just to when the bubble burst back in 2008. They had something like a $700 billion bailout, which is almost the military budget for the U.S. Think about it. The U.S. spends $833 billion annually on defense, and not a single CEO went to jail during that time, right? Of course, then you got to think about foreign policy. Essentially, companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman, they dictate U.S. foreign policy. So this is the military-industrial complex. This is what Dwight D. Eisenhower, warned about back in the 1950s. So essentially, these guys are the empire builders, right? Then you have big tech, of course, monopolizing everything: Google, Amazon, Facebook. They hoard the market, the data. They have lobbyists, and they don't care about monopolies. They just pay the fines. They don't care, Healthcare and big pharma. Here in the U.S., we pay 2 to 3 times more for prescription drugs than any other nation. Again, I could go on and on. You could talk about Goldman Sachs and Monsanto execs and all sorts of shit, right? Again, think about COVID. Perfect example. A lot of you in COVID were small business owners, right? Think about the PPP loans for small businesses. Most of that, which is billions of dollars passed, was looted, by connected law firms and these hedge funds and these political donors, essentially, right? So the billionaires during COVID got richer, and I think it was 30 million Americans that filed for unemployment, right? That's insane. Of course, infrastructure and energy, the fossil fuels subsidized despite climate change, again, and also the dollars is by the oil standard. So if you ever think they're going to go green, fucking guess again, right? That's not happening anytime soon. So this is And then, of course, you have now just the pump and dump schemes done by congressmen, by Congress people, by the president himself and his family, all sorts of just crazy corruption and shit that used to be either kept in the dark or was sort of the exception, not the rule. Now it's the rule. So I think what's causing a lot of this, it's a few things. It's a lot of things, actually. Number one, there's not a two-party system, it's a two-party cartel, because both sides take corporate money. I know the Democrats will say, no, but we take a lot of money from our constituents and we have one or two super PACs. Whatever, it's the same shit, and we can discuss that. Short election cycles, right? So if you have a short election cycle, think about that. How much time do you have to govern? You don't have a lot of time to govern because you're constantly fundraising. That's not governing, that's fundraising, right? And of course, no term limits for Congress. So that's entrenched power. Think you're sitting there for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Yeah, you're gonna hold on to that. And then the worst of them all is media consolidation, right? The narrative is controlled by a handful of these mega corporations. That's why, at least in all my videos, when I discuss these things, I try to, and I'm just going to disclose it right now, please do not listen to me. Go do your own research, right? There's many compelling, people you see on social media, on YouTube, on TV. And I encourage all of you to never take things at face value. Be critical, question everything, be objective. I guess former President Jimmy Carter said once, America's now an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. So if you want to change, it's not enough to vote once every 4 years. You need to push, the American public needs to push for term limits, ranked choice voting, and most importantly, public campaign financing, right? And then, of course, demanding transparency from the lobbyists, and these PAC disclosures, right? And you have to break up these monopolies like it's literally fucking, the 1900s again. And have, of course, independent media and these civic watchdogs, if you will, right? You got to keep the game, play by the rules, right? So, again, this is my breakdown. I'm sorry, it's a pretty long breakdown. And believe me, doing it in, what is 8 minutes is doing it no justice. There's a lot more nuances and a lot more depth to this. But if you guys, again, agree, disagree, have a different perspective, please drop a comment below.